Hey, this is Erb N Dub and I'm here today at DBS Music in Plymouth. I'm talking about how I make music and a whole lot more. Right, so my name's Erb N Dub, drum and bass producer. I'm now living in Brighton. I've got a few other aliases and I've been making drum and bass for about 10 years. So in about 2010 I started earning enough money to live off it properly, and then I've just sort of gone on to play, you know, all around Europe, America, Canada, stuff like that. I originally grew up playing drums and, you know, my musical tastes and styles have just evolved. I've still got the name Erb N Dub because that's kind of like what I was called when I was a kid, do you know what I mean? Even though I've got these other aliases, it's just sort of the name that sticks with me as more of a solo artist. So I make lots of styles of drum and bass really. A minute ago we was waiting for some other students. I was playing some of the tracks I've been making with Krafty Kuts and Melodic, which are like Neuro funk. I still make dance floor drum and bass, which is more like sort of technique or ram sounding stuff as well. I don't find like just sticking to one style of drum and bass exciting enough. I like neurofunk, but also like the dance floor styles of drum and bass. I like liquid, you know, and the techniques are different. So the techniques involved with making neurofunk are quite a bit different to making dance floor drum and bass. So today I'm going to go over a few things. I'm going to go over how I make sounds we're in neurofunk, from the drums to the basses, and then I'm also going to go over how I make the dance floor drums, more clinical stuff, how I've done a track recently with Krafty Kuts and Dynamite on their album, which is forthcoming. It's called All Four Corners. It's featuring Harry Shotter and the pop artist Example as well. So we made a hip-hop record, which I co-produced with Krafty Kuts, and then we shot a music video, which was originally going to be on a submarine, but when we got to the submarine, it was too narrow to shoot a good music video in it, so we ended up shooting it on a battleship, because it was next door to it. So we used a Second World War battleship, and yeah, so I'm going to go through how we done that, from how we recorded the vocals. For instance, Example was in Dubai, and he sent the vocals over, and how we matched the vocals up, and then how I actually went about doing a drum and bass remix of it as well, and why I did it in a certain way. So to start off with, I'm going to show you the hip-hop track that I just mentioned. It's called The War Is Over. So it's Krafty Kuts and Erb N Dub production, with the vocalist Dynamite, who is a massive drum and bass MC, works a lot with Hospital Records, and he was originally in Ronnie Sizes band as well, Represent, part of the Full Cycle crew from Bristol. And Dynamite, you know, is one of my, even though I work with him musically, he's, you know, one of my sort of heroes from when I was a kid, like listening to Ronnie Sizes and stuff like that. He's such a sick MC. We got Harry Shotter on it, who I grew up with. We went to like primary school together. So me and him have been mates since we were kids, and he's a devastating MC. He's probably one of the best in the country, if not the world. I'm going to say that because he's my mate, but he's a sick MC. And then Example as well. Example's crazy, like to work with him as well, because, you know, he's a normal guy, but you don't know that until you meet him, and he's really humble and very successful music artist, full stop really. He's had quite a few #1s, I believe, and he's had a wicked career. So I'm going to show you the video. Just a bit of it, and then this is not the drum and bass mix, this is the hip-hop version, the original, and then we will go into how I did the remix and so on. Like, so I'll just play the music video from the start.
0 red, -5.
Project went flat. All units clear. Switch over to standby.
I don't wanna hear about a man ghost writing. I wanna be a ghost face killer when I'm typing. Striking a cool with the crowd when I plug in the mic. Strike back, striking like lightning. Everybody wanna be the biggest on the platinum, but I'll be kinda cool with the way I be attacking them. Whacking them, backing them, body bagging them and dagging them. Smacking the track and then we're cracking them, magging them. I don't really feel nobody fucking with a shotty when it comes to the clarity. I'm on a different level to the man who wanna bring it. He can bring it, but you Shoddy with the syllables and the similes, never similar to me. There's no symmetry, simile to nobody. I'm never taking liberties, killing with these crafty bastard move military. Shut down. Everything I do is an event, so none of you are coming with the energy. You're telling me that you were never feeling me, then why bother holler me and follow me online? Better give me an apology. Monopolies are never stopping me. I do it properly, monotony. I'm sick of so sick, and so I gotta be the hot property, probably the authority on this double time thing. My policy quicker than quick, and I still sound clear though. So obsessed with it, borderline weirdo. Class act, but I'm not acting. De Niro, acrobat, super slick, superhero, supercharged, superseded by none. Put some respect on my name, like I'm baby. I'm done with the BS, so don't ever come with that CS. Your gas in the war has been won.
Tell them that the war is over. Tell them that the war is over. Stand down, there's no need to run. The news is in and we already won. Tell them that the war is over. Tell them that the war is over. Stand down, there's no need to run. The news is in and we already won. Some of the best are right here. Now the contests are rolling right here. The wickedest bringing the fresh right here.
Cool, so you got a verse at the end as well from Example. I'll just quickly play a bit so you can hear him on hip hop.
Sunday bad head to toe. Put you in a coffin and your name's John Doe. Physically, lyrically, typically, chemically, friend or an enemy. Speak to everybody on a level, but regrettably, you just lost. I just had to cut you off like the said to me. What you said to me? What you said to me? Shut up, you can't stand next to me. You're done, you're done. I'm gone, I'm gone.
Tell them that.
So yeah, that's the hip hop version. So I'm a drum and bass artist, so me and Krafty made that. I was like, cool, do you know what I mean? It is what it is. I like drum and bass, so we need a remix, you know, we need a club remix. So I was like, well, I'll do it. Do you know what I mean? It saved finding a budget to pay someone else to do it, and so on. And it saved me a bit of time because I already had the track. So I thought to myself, do I make it a Neurofunk remix? And I thought, maybe not, because I want it to appeal to like Example's audience as well, to make it a bit more broader spectrum. So I did that. I went and made a dance floor, you know, more sort of dance floorish rather than hard remix of it, which we're going to go through now. I actually made a conscious decision before I started the remix how I was going to do it, and that's really important. So when you get remixes in, you know, we done one for TC last year, which we got nominated for award for Best Remix of 2016. We went straight up Neurofunk because it suited the style of record, and it's been caned everywhere. It was like an anthem of last year. I see it being played all over the world, all different festivals. It was like, for the time when we released it, or when it was on dub plate, before it was released, it was the tune. You know, everyone was spinning it. And that we sat down and was like, let's make this really hard. You know, it was almost verging on jump up. But this particular remix, more dance floor. So I made it in Cubase. I used two different programs mainly, or three sometimes. I use Cubase and Ableton. I make tunes in either. When I'm making Neurofunk, make them in Ableton. It's a lot more control over things, like it's very fast, has some great plugins, all the stock plugins it comes with are sick. Cubase I prefer for more dance floor drum and bass. So the remix, I'll play a bit of it. I'll just play the drop. It's like that really, it's like a wall of sound. So I sent it over to Andy C first. I inboxed him on Twitter and he was like, yeah, sick mate. So I presume he's playing it. I was like, cool. Then we hit up Friction. Friction played it on his show on Radio 1. I think he played it a couple of times, you know, gave it a bit of a talk and stuff like that. Then we released it. It kind of went top 5 on Beatport. Don't know how it done on any other charts really. And I was like, right, my job's done. Do you know what I mean? I literally thought, how can I make this remix do the best it can do? I'd have liked to #1 on the national chart, but you know what I mean? That's not going to be possible. So it did what it did. And it's been out, the video, the original's been out a few weeks or a month now on SBTV. The remix has gone out, got its Radio 1 play. Target was playing the original on Radio 1. And, you know, even though it's underground music, we sort of, you know, done all the correct channels and it's got done what it's done. Once you've done all this, you're on to the next track now. You know, what's the next move? So with this particular track, let's have a quick look at the drums. These are the drums here. This is Cubase we're looking at, Cubase 9. If I zoom in, I've layered up a couple of kick drums. I would have made them in addictive drums, which I'll go over in a bit. And then I've bounced out different snares from different projects. Like it's a snare with a really long tail on it. It's like a white noise tail. We'll go over some drum design in a minute. And then I'll put a clap on it, and I'll put little fades on it. Let me zoom in a bit. Like the clap on it on its own is like this. So it's just like a sort of almost like mid-rangey sort of like, it just fills out the frequencies. If I'd had more time, I would have mixed this track down slightly different, but I was on a deadline, so it had to go out as it was. I would have probably shortened the snare on reflection and things like that, so it was more snappy. And then I've got another snare here, little underlay one, and then that for the transient. So I've actually layered these three up to be like a big snare, really. The kick's pretty similar. I'm not going to spend too much time on this remix. So yeah, you've got the kick drums there layered up, and percussion below it, a crash, and a few other things, some shuffles that I would have made in Addictive Drums. So I'm just going to play these. Doesn't sound overcomplicated. And then there's like a big sort of wash of stuff here. It just fills it out, and another sort of ghost note. Some other bits and bobs. So if I play all the drums together. So I've got like quite a wall of sound sort of drum kit there. And then I've sent it to probably like a group channel where you take all of the channels and put it to one fader, one volume fader, and then treat it accordingly. Like on the drums here, I have a Fab Filter EQ, which I've just cut out some of the sub information, like 33 Hertz. So basically anything below that I've just ducked, so it's not there anymore. And this is set into mid-side mode and just worked on the stereo. I just wanted, like, if you know about stereo imaging, you want like all your lower frequencies in mono essentially. So that's all that EQ is doing. It's taking out all the stereo information and just leaving the mono information at the lower frequencies. On here I have this EQ, which is a Native Instruments. It's I like the sound of it. It's modelled on like a mastering EQ. I think it's a Manley. I think that's what it is. And I just like the sort of saturated sound of it, and I was just using it in mid-side mode to widen the stereo in the higher frequencies. And what else? I use Camel Crusher quite a lot, which is basically like a little distortion plugin that was free. I think you can still get it online. It's got a compressor and tube distortion in it. And what I found is in sort of last year or two is saturation or distortion is really important for filling out a mix down. Like I was, spent ages worrying about EQ and stuff like that. But I normally try and like distort something, even if it's ever so slightly, so you get a thicker, fuller sound. It's like why you used to use tape. People used to run tape a bit hot, like run it into the red, so it starts to distort, but in a nice way. I'm not talking like really, jagged or sort of a guitar sounded distortion. I'm just talking so it sort of like warms the sound up. And this little plugin here, it's an essential tool. I use it on lots of stuff really. Like there's, in Ableton you can use saturators. There's a saturator plugin, or there's lots of different ways of doing it. I like this Camel Crusher plugin. Where else are we on here? Oh, this is a new plugin by Isotope. So I was with a drum and bass producer called TB, who's on RAM. He lives not too far away from me, and I went round his house and we was just talking about music, showing each other how we produce and stuff like that. And he was like, "Have you seen this new Neutron plugin by Isotope?" And he hooked me up with a copy, hit up Isotope, introduced me, and they sent me a copy over so I could check it out. And it's like quite a useful tool. I wouldn't use it for mixing down tracks on its own, but it can analyze what you're doing and make adjustments. For instance, like the EQ points on this, it listened to my whole drum bus. Like you can literally hit where is the button? It's something like, this track analysis button. And it'll see where you need to sort of take frequencies out, add frequencies, and it does it with the compression as well. So it's like a little tool which can, literally do a bit of work for you. These little cuts and stuff, I'm not the greatest sound engineer. If I'm going to find these and know exactly, this is what I need to do. But this plugin does it for you. It analyzes what you put it on and makes subtle adjustments. From there, then you adjust it yourself. If it sounds good, then you can make it sound a little bit better or worse really if you're doing it too much. So it's a really cool little tool just to make my drums sound a bit better. Then I use a limiter. Limiter just puts a lid on it, which basically sort of ties everything together. This Fab Filter limiter, the Pro L, has the same sort of settings that a compressor would have. It's just a bit more drastic as in the amount of compression or limiting it does. So you've got attack and release, which if you put the attack up that way, you're going to let more of the drum through. If you bring it down like this, it's going to limit it hard straight away. So it's good to have, like, you know, a decent amount of attack. Release could be slightly like down a bit because it basically stops limiting or compressing quicker. That's what a release does. So that's all that's doing is putting a lid on the drum, squashing it together. I've got like a percussion group as well here, so I would have put loads of effects on them. Let's have a look. That's a compressor. See, more Camel Crusher. I don't know what this is. That is a EQ based on an old Pultec. So when you think of like vintage EQs that are like now software, like you have all these emulations like the UAD card and stuff here, they've got a sound to them. Like, and you're more looking for the saturated sound. So if you run stuff through a mixing desk, like a Neve mixing desk, it sounds like a Neve mixing desk. So all they're doing is recreating plugins out there to sound like old bits of equipment because they have a sound to them, and it's normally saturation, a bit of distortion, a bit of noise really. So all these plugins, you know, whether that's, you know, the Pultec, an old EQ, it has a sound. So different types of EQs do different things. Same with all different types of compressors. They all sound slightly different, you know, and they all have a purpose. What else is on here? Like a transient shaper and some side chaining tools. The kick drum has some Waves plugins on it. This is like a bass emulation plugin, so it's focused around 80 Hertz, around where the kick drum's fundamental frequency sits. So all I've done is enhanced it using this plugin. And a normal EQ wouldn't give you the same sound because it adds additional harmonic content to whatever you're adding it to. Again, working on the stereo, Camel Crusher. There's like another compressor on it. This is based on an old compressor, an API compressor. You can still buy these now. And it's really good on kick drums. So that's why I used it on this, to shape the kick, to make it really tight. And that's some mad EQ setting. Just using my ears really. I've obviously just scooped out the mid frequencies. Neurofunk, we tend to boost the mid frequencies on kick drums. So it's different techniques really. You still have to use your ears. And the thing is with music, all these like techniques that you learn can vary on different tracks. One thing that works on one track can be completely different on the other. It might have the opposite settings within reason. So this is a multi-band transient shaper, and all this does is take 4 frequencies, 4 bands, and then you can shape the transient as in the initial sound part. Normally you shape the first attacky part of the sound. So it's just so I can get more of a like definitive punchy kick drum. You don't normally have to use all these plugins, but you know, I'm using my ears, I'm trying things in the mix down stage, trying to get things to work. So I've tried all different plugins. Everyone's different, there's lots of different ways of doing stuff. So that's the drums really, without getting too deep into them. You can use sample CDs, but I tend to make a lot of, well, most of my drums, pretty much all of them, and bass sounds from scratch. The reason being, if you make a nice kick drum, you remember that kick drum and you know where it is on your computer. If you're going through sample packs, you might come across 50 good kick drums, but I don't tend to hear them. Do you know what I mean? I'm just like, that's a kick drum, that's a kick drum, that's a kick drum, that's a snare drum, and I don't really focus on them, and I just get lost in this never-ending world of sample packs. So it's really good to make your own drums, or sounds in general, and you're also constantly learning. You know, from using addictive drums, I've then gone on to making drums out of synths. So you could use like FM8, layer them up with like real drums. You can you can even make kick drums in Massive, like Native Instruments Massive. You can make kick drums and snare drums and anything. I was with Malix on Monday night, and he was using Operator in Ableton to make the hi-hats, and they sound really good. You know, I know you can do it, I've just not had the time to sit down and make my own hi-hats in Operator. I've made them in FM8, you know, it all has a purpose. Live drums sound good, as in like addictive drums or Superior Drummer or real drum kits, you know, recording real drums, which I've done recently. So I took, because I'm a drummer, since I was a kid. I took my vintage jazz drum kit and had some other guys from another studio come up, and we used like lots of recorders, like these recorders here, you know, with the Zoom pocket tracks, whatever you call them, with the stereo mics on it. We set up a few different room mics and stuff. Let me quickly find it, and here you go. I'll show you the pictures. In the recording stage, this is my studio out in Kent, so that's like this bass drum here is actually a floor tom we converted into a bass drum, and these are like old vintage Premier toms, and then we had a different array of cymbals. You see the water bottle here? We put a mic in it so we could record the resonance of the water bottle. It's mainly the kick drum, and use that in the mix. And then we had a few different drum kits as well downstairs. In the room downstairs, we recorded all them, and we had lots of different snare drums. We took them in the bathroom, took them in the hallway and recorded them, and so on. Then the studio I was working with, they took it back to their studio because they had a load of analog gear, ran it through all this sort of stuff, sent it back to me, and it was really, really clean, like sounded almost like pop drum and bass drums. So then I went in and put it through like some of the chain that I was just showing you then, like more distortion, the multiband transient shaping, and made it sound drum and bass. So now some of the breaks, if I play you them, I layered up as well, that's what I was saying, with like synthetic drums as well. So the kick drums I may have fastened up with like a bit of an FM8 kick drum that I'd made, and layered the two together. But I wanted to recreate old school, my own old school sounding drum and bass breaks. And this is what I've done. And I sent them to a few other producers like Noisia, Audio on RAM, Calix and TB, quite a few others, even the Prototypes. They all went mad for them because they sound old school but new school. So I'll quickly play you them. Like, they sound like they're up from an old 60s record or whatever, but they're not. We just recorded them in, like, essentially what's just like a wooden building, really, which is where my studio is, in the middle of nowhere. It's like, alright, there was a long process to it, don't get me wrong, but we was doing it at first to make a sample CD for Loop Masters, and I think now I'm just going to keep it for myself because they come out wicked. You know, like, have you ever heard of the Amen drum break? So everyone's tried to recreate that drum break. But what's to say, you know, doing this, we wouldn't make our own version, or, you know, a drum break that becomes timeless. You know, there's classic drum breaks out there that everyone's used, or you know, from so many records. For instance, the Amen break, and that was just a snippet of a record that's been used over and over and over again. But I've made all my own breaks. I know which breaks I can go to now. So going back to this remix, it's important to really work on your own sounds. So with the basses, unfortunately, a lot of this I've had to do in audio because I don't use this computer so much for producing, and I've got another Mac, but even that now is running out of power because plugins are getting more powerful. It's draining the CPU. So when I'm making sounds, I bounce them to audio now. However, I will show you how I make sounds as well, but these are like the end results. So this is the main sort of fuzz of the bass. And if I zoom in, actually, you'll be able to see it a bit better. So the different colours, I've just coloured it in. So these are all on F, and I think that goes to an F sharp probably. Yeah, I've transposed it by 1. So on the keyboard, it's just gone up to the little black note, and this will probably go up 3 or something. Yeah, it's gone up 3 to whatever note that is. And then I would have recopied it, and I think that's just a massive, I believe. Yeah, it's just a sub patch that I've made. And if you look at the MIDI, I have to zoom in. You have like, I'll make this bigger. You have the initial note, which is a bit longer, and then you have these short ones, so it makes that pulsating rhythm. So it's a driving record. So if I solo, it's just. So imagine how a bass player would play, you know, they'd be like, dun, 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 dun. It's not just like Neurofunk where a bass player would just be like hitting one note. They're just like, brrr, and the rest of it's distortion and filtering. This is like, you know, it's programmed a bit. So the two together. And then there's a reactor patch which I've frozen, so I can't actually access it at the moment, but another layer, if I solo it on its own. So there's like 3 layers really to that bass, and then there's lots of little edits at the ends, like these ones here. Let me just solo this. Yeah, these little bits here which I would have made in various synths and bounced out the audio. I'm going to show you how I do it after this. So essentially that's it really. Probably, well, I know they're all grouped. They would have sidechaining on it. If you don't know what sidechaining is, it's basically setting up a compressor so I can tell it to turn the volume down on something when I want it to. So for instance, with this, you'd send a kick drum to it. Every time the kick drum hits, it ducks the bass out of the way. So it just allows more room in the track, because we want our tracks really loud. So to get tracks really loud, you have to use sidechaining most of the time. So yeah, if you don't really know what a sidechaining is, you can just Google it. It's quite straightforward. But I don't really want to get into that. Sound effects, really important. Spend a lot of time making sound effects from scratch, from synths or Foley sounds, or even like, you know, going out and recording them yourself. That's like a white noise with a bit of LFO on it. I don't know what this bigger section is. So I bounced it all as one again because my CPU or my computer was running out of power. So there's other sounds in there like a little riser and stuff like that. Nothing much really. There might be another one here. Yeah, these are all the lead parts actually, which I'll go on to now. So in the record, when it dropped, I made it quite melodic. So the bass is just pulsating, but I wanted to have like a hook. So it's a DJ tune really. The arrangement I've made like a DJ tune as well. It's like, I wanted to just smash it out in the decks. I want to double drop it. It's written in F, a lot of dancefloor drum bass, well, most drum bass is written in F, unfortunately. And then I just wanted to go into clubs, smash it out. So I was like, right, I've written the drop, I need a lead line for it. So let's have a quick listen to the lead line on the drop. That's a Reese sound. Reese was made years ago by getting 2 oscillators and detuning them on a synth against each other, or 3 oscillators, and it's just gone on from there really. And that's been used in like ridiculous amount of music as well. It's a very famous sort of sound of Reese. However, if you process it, distort it, blah blah blah, resample it, you can get more distorted Reeses. That's where Neurofunk's kind of come from. And that's all that is. It's pitched up. Just played it on the keyboard. It fills in the gaps. It doesn't sit on the kick or snare. It's like in all the gaps of it. So I've left space for it. So the rhythm on its own complements the track rather than like confuses it, especially in the mixdown sets. There's like a little reverse sound in it as well. Somewhere here. Oh, there's 2. So that's like, you know, little stabs of it fading in. And then there's this just reverse. And then if I play it together, it's actually a different sound reversed. And that's about it with the leads really. Sound effects. And down to the remix part. So this is where, you know, I'd take a bit of time and think about it. I knew the lyrics quite well because of recording them in the original. I put the acapella in at first, everyone's lyrics, and it kind of was just too much. I got it in time as well because the original's at like 160, I believe, beats per minute, and this is at 174. So I time stretched it, which I'm sure everyone can do a bit of time stretching. It's quite normal. But then I was like, don't want to use the whole acapella because it just kind of becomes quite monotonous. It's just like drum and bass doesn't really cater for full-on hip-hop rapping, do you know what I mean, the whole way through it. So I had to go through and find the lines that I liked, like, so let's have a look here. So, first of all, it had some speech in the original record before I even got to the rappers, so.
0 red, -5.
So there's that, it's probably got a little bit of reverb on it, and it's, you know, it's taken from an old film, I think.
Project went planet.
Yeah, and then I took snippets, I believe, of the the vocals. Have a look.
No need to run.
Yeah, so that was a Dynamite lyric. It says no, something like you need to run or no need to run, something like that. And then I put it through a vocoder. So there's lots of different vocoders on the market, but I used one by Isotope, I think. It was some synth type. What's it called? Vox Synth. Yeah, that's it. And I literally just took the acapella, routed it in a way that I could hit record, and just went through and kept changing all the settings and fiddling. It's just recording all as I'm doing it. It's recording it all in. Then I ended up with like lots of different versions. Yeah, so that's Dynamite again there, where he's like got some weird sort of like, he sounds a bit like he's a synth, and it was just me going through all presets, twiddling knobs, just trying to get it to sound interesting and more musical than just a clean vocal. What's this bit here?
Some of the best are right here.
Another contest, you're rolling right here.
Yeah, and I think there's a bit of Shotter in there somewhere as well. I don't know where he is.
Shut down.
Yeah, he says shut down. You know, I was trying to use key lyrics that fit drum and bass, do you know what I mean? No need to run. So in my head, I'm thinking like, it's setting up like a bit of an atmosphere. It's setting the scene really. Like if you need to run, like this is going to be a big tune. Like shut down, like we just shut down the place, you know, shut down with music. Something about being the best as well. I was like, yeah, we're the best. Do you know what I mean? This is all in my head. I don't think that, but you know, it creates the theme to the record, the remix. So
some of the best are right here.
yeah, some of the best are right here. I'm basically saying, yeah, these MCs on this record, they're the best. That's why I'm going to keep that line.
Another contest, you're rolling right here.
Yeah, something like no contest. Basically, no other MC can test it. You know, it's kind of like a little producer, little thing. Like, yeah, this we're the nuts here type thing. You know, it's only one record as well. So that's the vocals, and then there's this other folder which I called extras, which is a load of other sounds and a bed of stuff, little synth sounds, which run through the intro and some at the drop. And then it build up before the record drops. And then the tune drops really. So that's the sort of foundation elements of what's going on in the record. With the mix downs and stuff like that, a lot of the stuff I've done pre-making the record, like I will spend like a day making new sounds before I even start a tune. Like I have a Dropbox set up, so I just make all my sounds and put them in Dropbox. But for instance, at the weekend, I was away for a month. I was in the Alps, and I got back last week, and I was really itching to get in the studio, so I went down to the Brighton studio that I use with some of my friends, and then got in there and thought, right, I want to make some new drums. So I sat and made a whole folder of new kicks and snares. They're all different versions. And these in here, I thought to myself, you know, why do I keep squashing the life out of these snares? I want to keep maintain the transients. So the next day I went in and made, which sound like lighter snares, like this. But when I look at them in Cubase, instead of it looking like a block of sound, it should have like a more of a snare drum look to it. So I've kept like the initial transient, and what I found was the previous day I was over running everything too hot. So I was looking at it and it was just a block of snare, and it sounded good on its own, but these snares here, where it's got a better shape to it, sound a lot better when I'm making tunes. It sounds a lot better in the mix. So yeah, I will spend days, if not weeks, just preparing sounds. So it's almost like when I go to start a tune, I whole new sample pack of basses, a whole new sample pack of kicks, snares, percussion, sound effects to make a tune from. And before you know it, you've made a tune in a few hours. The worst thing about making music is if you stop and decide to make a snare drum halfway through a track, or you decide to make a new bass patch. You know, you're not going to finish the record, unfortunately. You're not, because all your attention goes on to, I'm making a synth sound now. But if I've got everything prepared, I can just be creative. And I know, you know, for instance, if I made the sounds in a studio, or if you made the sounds in the studios here, you know they sound relatively good. So I could take my laptop, like when I leave here today, so like, I don't know, 5-hour journey or something like that. I'm going to sit on the train and use these sounds which have been made in the studio and make a tune. Right? It won't necessarily be mixed down, but I know all the core elements sound good. If I decided to make sounds on the train, they're not going to sound very good because I've just got a pair of Sennheisers. I'm not in a, you know, a £30,000 studio, and I'm just, you know, it's not going to work. So preparing your sounds is really important. It helps for workflow. It helps for ease of finishing tunes, mix downs and stuff like that. Like I'm sure and I still do it now, I'll get halfway through a tune and I start making sounds, or I get halfway through a tune and start mixing it down. You kind of got to just focus on how you're going to do it. Spend a day making sounds, spend a day or two or a week making the record, spend a day mixing it. I will apply some mixing techniques as I'm going, but you know, I've got to really stop myself from getting into the mix down stage. I actually am probably one of the weird producers who likes mixing down records. You know, I find that most enjoyable, which is mad because most people I speak to, they hate it. You know, they like making tunes. I like making tunes, but I like the task of trying to mix down a record. Sometimes it can be horrible though, because the elements that I may have used haven't been good enough. You know, no one's perfect. So you might be trying to mix down a record which is never going to sound as good as you want it to. So it takes a lot of thought. You have to think to yourself, why doesn't it sound as good as I want it to? What's wrong with it? Let's change this, let's change that, change all the drums, change the bass patch. You know, I'm working on a few records at the moment and just can't get the basses to sound right. However, we finished the tune, you know, and to try and change the basses when the tune's finished, nothing seems to fit like the basses that we had, and it's just going around in circles. However, I'll get there in the end. So, I'll just quickly look at the master bus. For anyone who makes their own music, you know, a lot of times you want it, well, everyone wants it loud now. So if you're playing at a party, playing in a club, festival, you want it to sound wicked on the sound system. And a lot of that's to do with the, well, 99% of it's the mix down. So just doing all the normal things which you'll learn here, like focusing on EQ and compression and reverb and everything that you probably get told on a daily basis. That's 99% of it. I thought that if I got a record sounding alright and sent it to a mastering engineer, they'd do something really good to it and make it sound great. It's impossible. It doesn't work, it doesn't happen like that. All they do is get the track that you've sent them and enhance it. Yeah, make it a bit brighter or a bit more bass, a bit louder. That's it. They can't, like, you know, they don't put it in like a magic machine and then it comes out sounding like a noisier record. It just doesn't happen. Like, noisier sounds that good because they've done it all in the mix down stages or in the pre-production when they're making sounds. So you really got to focus on the mix downs. But then I do master my own music now as well, because I still use some mastering engineers. Like, I'd still use Star Delta, like Lewis is really good. But for some of my music, it's just a bit quicker if I just master it myself. And normally I'm just working on a limiter. So a limiter just basically squashes the sound and turns everything up, you know, just gives it more loudness. So I use Fab Filter a lot, especially in Neurofunk. But in this record, I used Ozone 7, and I used quite a lot in this actually. So I put this on my master bus. I didn't bounce out a WAV or anything like that. I kind of mixed into it as well. Unfortunately, it needed to be handed in for release very quickly, so I just bung loads of these plugins on it, you know, very crudely, and then tweaked them really quickly. And I was like, yeah, that kind of sounds good. Let's hope for the best. Been playing it out, it sounds cool in the club. Do you know what I mean? So I'm happy with it. So and it's out and people like the record, so it's all good. So it's just an EQ really. With mastering, you don't tend to do drastic EQ points. Like if you did that, it'd really notice on the record, it'd change it. Unless the record's quite bad, as in it's been not mixed not very well, you're normally doing like 1 or 2 dB increments like of gain just to shape the sound. So all this is doing is like I probably picked out the kick and the snare, and then put a bit of a duck in the mids, just using my ears, and give it a bit more tops. So there is on here like a multi-band compressor. If you don't know what a multi-band compressor is, you can just watch, you could learn that here actually, or I having access to such a great place, I would go on YouTube. So multi-band compressor, what I'm doing is compressing the low frequencies, which is basically stopping them from moving around. I just want a solid, really strong sub bass. You know, there's nothing worse than the sub bass disappearing or getting louder or quieter. So in the mastering stage, I would have done this in the mix down, but in the mastering stage, I've just compressed the sub bass, including some of the sub of the kick, and then turned it up a little bit. Because once you compress something, it normally drops it down a bit in volume, so you can bring it back up here. And I did have an auto gain and the release on it as well. I think it's an auto release. I just put them on and just use my ears. When I took them off, because to me I was thinking, but if I'm turning it up manually, why do I need the auto gain and stuff like that? However, it just sounded better and got better results by using them in combination. So an exciter is like this is a multi-band exciter, which is like a saturation tool. So saturation, what it actually does is it adds additional harmonics, whereas an EQ would just enhance a frequency. A saturator will take that initial frequency and add additional harmonics, like some more content to the sound. Without worrying about it too much more than that, that's really all distortion does until you really sort of drive stuff. It's adding more harmonics, more content, so you've got more to play with. I like tube distortion. You get lots of tube mics, you get tube desks, tube EQs, you get tube everything, and it's just a, what do we call it in the UK, a valve. Like valve guitar amps and stuff like that. The stuff runs through it, it gets warmer, I don't know how it does it. The light glows and it does magic, and then it comes out sounding a bit better. You know, so this is like an emulation tool. So you've got different versions tape. So today I came into this building next door, and they said, do you want to just chill out in here for a minute? And I walked in, you've got like this big Studer tape machine, I think that's how you say it. And I was like jokingly, I went, can I run some drums through that? And they went, yep. So we set it up, you know, within about half hour, I was using that tape machine and I was running it a bit red, like on the meters, because it adds saturation. And what it does is it enhances low frequencies, it can change transients. I just quickly done that and recorded it all back in. So when I get back today, I've got loads of different versions of drums I've got, mainly Neurofunk drums, run through this tape machine. Yeah, there's plugins for it, like you've got a tape setting on here, but come on man, like that tape machine, I've never really seen one before. I was like, I want to use that, you know, it's an amazing thing to have here. So I was straight on that. So yeah, so there's a bit of excitement on it, or saturation. This is a post EQ. I just felt like I needed to do a bit more EQing really. I just wanted to boost some high frequencies. It says 2 dB there, so I'm not going crazy. And then stereo imaging. So all that's doing is widening the frequencies I'm telling it to. You know, like the speakers here, I'm just pushing it out to the side, say, or pulling it in. Like the sub-bass frequencies here up to 129 hertz are in mono. Basically means it's the same's coming out both speakers. So to your ears, it sounds like it's banging the center. And stereo information of an overall track normally is supposed to come out like, I don't know, like an ice cream cone, if you know what I mean. So it's supposed to come out to the sides the higher it gets in frequency. That's like, you know, as far as I'd take it. Then a limiter. In Ozone you've got quite a few different limiters. You've got different types here. You've got these 3, then you've got this one, but inside them you have different types of limiters as well. Don't know why they've done it like that. I've been through them all. Every track sounds different, and some limiters sound better on other tracks. It's just the way it works. So with this particular track, I went through all the different limiter types on here, twiddled everything, and I was like, right, I like the sound of this. And then just went with that mode. It's like this IRC4, transient mode, and it's basically, it should preserve the transient. So I wanted the kick and snare and, you know, the percussion to have a nice bit of attack on it for the style of record. And then I would have bounced it out. I did get it mastered, I think, and the master I got back for a professional music mastering studio, I didn't particularly like the sound of, so I ended up just using my version, which is a bit of a waste of money, really, to be fair. But, you know, you don't know until you try. This is the thing about using mastering engineers. It can be really good sometimes, they can really nail it, but they might hear your music completely different to how you hear it. So when you get it back, it sounds like, why did you do that? Do you know what I mean? And that's what I felt like when I got this master back. But then other times I'm like, wow, I never would have done that, and so on. So it has pluses and minuses, and it happens with no matter what producer it is. You know, I remember when we was a bit younger, like there was a producer I know called Destruction, and he did like a remix for Sony, and his music studio, he had like 2 Sony speakers, like in the corner of his room, hi-fi speakers. It was more about his turntables. He'd done the mix down for Sony, and they got all the stems and had it professionally mixed and mastered, and then they went back to him and said, oh, we want to use your mix and master, which he'd done on hi-fi speakers that weren't even in front of him. They were literally like you set up in your bedroom. But it just, you know, it just the way it works sometimes. So that's the process of that particular record. It started off as an original, call it trappy hip-hop tune. Got all the vocalists. It took quite a lot of effort, you know, especially to find the right artist for it as well. Example, I think I said he was in Dubai, so when he sent the vocals over, they were recording in a different studio on a different mic, so we had to balance them up. A lot of that was to do with EQ, just to get them to sound the same as the vocal recordings from Shotter and Dynamite. And then we went on from there to get the track mastered and then shoot the video. We had to source the video as well, the location as well. Example actually directed it, and it was really cool, man. I wasn't in it. I was in it, but there's points where people are wearing masks, and I just put a mask on, but I just turned up like, you know, I made this track, you know what I'm saying? I just thought I'd pop in. Then they were like, well, you've got to get in the video. I was like, oh, you know, I didn't really want to be in it. But it was really cool, man, being on a battleship and things like that. It was like, you know, it's a cool video. I've done a lot of videos, but that was like a very enjoyable one. Then the remix, and then I went through all the process of why I done it, who played it, and everything else, which is cool. So that's a successful release as far as I'm concerned. So that's one side of the sort of drum and bass that I make. So the more technical side is the Neuro funk. So a lot of it I make with Krafty Kuts and Melodic, which I said earlier, and then I've been working on a lot of stuff solo as well. I've just got to finish it. I've got about 10 ideas. And some other vocalists and stuff, and then with Krafty Kuts and Melodic we've done about 15 tracks which haven't been released. We've just been caning them in our sets. We sent an EP to Ram Records yesterday because they want to release some of our music, so we'll see what they say really, just waiting for them to get back to us. And then some of the music we won't even release, we just keep it exclusive for the DJ sets. We've just done a remix of the Prototypes as well, which I believe is going to come out at some point soon, of one of their tracks, Rockets, Guns, Blazing, a Neuro Funk remix to it, and then we've done a remix of Mampy Swift, Gangsters. Probably by the time this video comes out, you know, they'll either be out or they're not coming out, so you'll just hear them in the clubs. So yeah, there's lots of stuff going on with the Neuro Funk sort of side of it. So a couple of things. Let's start with drums. Let's open up Keybase again, and then I'm also going to show you the Ableton project for those that use Ableton, of the remix we've done for TC and Jake's, the Next Height remix. We can go through that very quickly, but I want to get into how I'm making drums now, so it's a bit more technical rather than, you know, analysing tracks as such. So let's quickly play this, see what it sounds like. Right, I'll turn it down a bit. Right, so let's have a quick listen. This is an idea. It's not a finished idea. It's loads of sounds, loads of drums chucked in, start a new tune. Probably took me 5 minutes to make this, which so it's going to sound crazy. sounds like a mess. There's way too much reverb on it. I literally was just making as many tracks as possible in one day. So starting off with that, it's the drums mainly. The drums sound sick. They're going to be mixed down properly again, but the vibe of them's right. Let me solo them. So it's Addictive Drums, which is a tool. I can't see the bottom of it, unfortunately, because we've resized the screen for the projector. So I can't get down to these features, unfortunately. So bass drum, snare drum. So you can go in, shape the bass drums, change the bass drums, change any drum on this. You have room mics, overhead mics. You basically, if you've ever thought about or actually done it, recorded a drum kit, you have pretty much all the options. However, you can, you don't normally have like 20 snares, but with Addictive Drums you do. You can repitch them, you can shape them, you can do whatever you think basically to a real drum kit. So just imagine you've got a real drum kit on your computer. So kick drum, with this drum beat I've pitched it up, I've shaped it with an envelope shaper, so I've made it shorter, I've EQ'd it, so this is all done in the plugin. I've compressed it, I've added some saturation and shaped it, and then you can route it out so it's on its own channel inside Cubase, so the kick drum's just coming out on one volume fader. Then I can add more plugins to that. Same with the snare drum. So that's the snare there you can see on the screen. I've literally gone in and shaped these drums how I want them to be. I think we started doing this with Malox and Chrissy as well. So we used to do it a slightly different way, where we'd make kicks and snares and then bounce them as audio, but we wanted some more control over it, so you can have Addictive Drums running live in a track, rather than just placing bits of audio everywhere. I can go through, say if I didn't like this snare drum, I could, alright, I want to change it. So now I've got a different snare straight away, but it's also changing the sound of the room mics and everything else. Because let me go to the mixer. This is like, imagine we recording a drum kit in this room. You set up a few different mics. One would record the sound of the room. You'd have overheads, you'd have mics on the individual drums. So if I just solo the room mic, I get to treat that. I get to have that sound, so I can fade it in, fade it down, distort it, whatever. So if I'd done all this in audio, I wouldn't be able to do that. If I change the snare, it changes the sound of the room mic as well. I've got an overhead here. So that's just the two mics that would be on top of the drum kit. Hi-hats. I can swap them out for whatever hi-hat I want. Growing up playing drums, I was always a Zildjian player. I like A Customs and what's the other one? K, Z, and I like Sabian cymbals as well. They have all these cymbals, so I know the sound of the cymbals from being a drummer. So I'm like, right, I want to use that with that and that with that. And it's amazing for me because I don't have to necessarily set up a drum kit, and I don't really want to start playing jungle drum and bass loops when I'm trying to make a Neurofunk record. I've got to focus on what I'm doing. It'd take me a day to set up a drum kit and play the beats that I want to play and record them, and they probably wouldn't sound as good as what I need them to without spending more time on them. So I've got Addictive Drums. You can use Superior Drummer. I see there's other things out there like Easy Drummer. Native Instruments do some. There's loads of them now, but I like Addictive Drums. Like people like Noisia, they tend to use Superior Drummer, and other people use Addictive Drums. They sound so different, but they both sound excellent at the same time. So the kick drum, let me open up the plugin again. So imagine we're working on the kick, we could retune it. If you want lower frequency kick, the scope is endless. Same with the snares. So I've routed them out on the mixer, and let's look at the kick. So I've gone in and EQ'd it. So this one here, I've boosted some of the tops, the low frequency information, and used my ears really. Took out some of the harshness around 3K. So 1 to 3K is where our hearing is really sensitive to. So sometimes it's good to enhance it. Most of the time you want to really focus on whether you should or you shouldn't, because it can be like really brittle and horrible sounding frequency. It's not a nice frequency. But if you want things to poke out of the mix, then, you know, enhance it. You know, it's just that frequency that gets in your ear. The higher frequencies sound quite nice to us. You know, the sort of sizzle on things, we're not too worried about them. It's normally like between 1 and 3K, 4K. If you EQ it wrong, it can cause problems in a mix, or just make things like you just don't want to listen to it for too long. Low frequencies are low frequencies, really. You just we want bass. Like all of us in here wants bass. You know, that's why we like going to nightclubs for partying and girls and all that. But it's like for the bass. I'll go for the bass anyway. You know, that's what's always exciting me. I want to feel music. So when you're EQing, just focus on the lower frequencies. You get them right. A good rule of thumb is when you're mixing something, start with the lower frequencies. Once you get them like tight and nice, then you can start moving through the spectrum. The tops are the tops. You can't really hear them. You know, the real high frequencies. They're there as long as they're sounding nice. But you get the weight in something, the lows and the lower mids, that help whatever you're doing after the EQ, like compressors and stuff like that, how they work. You know, if it's got a lot of low frequency content, it's going to work differently to if you all of a sudden EQ'd that out. The compressors' attack and release times will change, so you have to be aware of that. So there's a bit of compression running on the kick drum, just to shape it really. A compressor, when you squash something, can enhance certain parts of it. It can give you better transients, shape the release. Normally when you compress it, you have to use a bit of makeup gain, turn it back up. And that's all this is doing really. So let's have a look. If I take it off, it's not really doing that much in this room, but I think if you took it into one of the studios, you'd better hear more what it's actually doing and why it's being used. I seem to have used another EQ. I thought I want some more tops in it. And then I used a limiter just to squash the sound. To be fair, the more you limit stuff, the louder it gets on the ears. I'm not talking about volume, because if you set the output of a limiter to, let's just do it to -1, it's never going to go louder than -1 in dB. That's the point of a limiter. It puts a lid on it. However, the more you drive it, the more content goes into the limiter and the louder it seems on the ears. Does this make sense? It can add more sort of like weight to a sound, but in dB volume, as in like literally a volume control, it won't go above this -1 now. It appears to get louder if we drive it, and it might sound like shit as well, but well, it's not doing that much. However, it's already going into the limiter. It's already limiting as it's going in. It does make it louder, but it's not the greatest source to exactly demonstrate that. But that's all that's doing, is just squashing the sound a bit more, even though there's a compressor and stuff on it. There's my mate, the Camel Crusher. So I've used a bit of tube distortion and a bit of compression. So make it sound awful. It's very hard to hear in a room like this exactly what you're doing, especially when I've got my back to the speakers as well. So all of these are like really fine adjustments that you do in a studio or wherever you're working. The snare drum, that's quite a drastic looking EQ, to be fair. Like if you walked into a lecture and they said this is how you EQ a snare, you'd think they were mad, because to me that looks crazy. However, it's neurofunk, so I found the fundamental sound, fundamental frequency of the snare drum, basically the weighty part of it, and EQ'd it in the wrong place, as you can see, because it is actually there. Oh, I know why, because I've changed the drums on this record. When I was going through it a minute ago, I was choosing different kicks and snares, so it's probably a lower frequency snare. And then I've just gone through and boosted the frequencies, which made it poked out a bit more in the mix. And the high frequencies, who knows? You know, it obviously sounded good. So the overheads, I've just put a bit of compression on them. So basically, like, squash the noise up. I want all that sort of fuzz and rubbish, really, that you'd get, all the artifacts of recording in a room. I squash it, so when you compress something, it sort of brings the bottom up and squashes the top down, so the bottom, all the noise would become louder. So I've done that on both channels, and I've probably EQ'd out the lower frequencies. Yeah, some of the lower frequencies, so all that sort of rumble you'd get from recording a drum kit is gone now, and same there, most of it. So otherwise it starts to sound really messy in the low frequencies, because the room, the bass, the kick snare, and there's another output from Addictive Drums, then all get routed again to one fader. And it's this one here, it says drums all. So this is where I just do the final touches. If I bypass it, hopefully it sounds different. Oh. Sounds pretty lifeless, doesn't it? It doesn't sound nowhere near as fat. So it'd just be down to whatever I've put on here. So that was an EQ, which is in mid-side mode, which is just taming, as I said earlier, it's just taming the stereo information. So all this is in mono. So the lower frequencies, I just kind of like do that quite a lot. The compressor here is probably doing a lot of the work, where the, turn it off. It's doing a lot of the sort of sound shaping really, because again in here it's a bit hard to hear, but you know, I can hear straight away that the tops come a bit more alive when it's on. When I turned it off, the sort of cymbals and stuff like that sort of set back a little bit. Then on here, I did use a UAD plugin. I think it was the plug-in version of the tape machine, the Studer tape machine that's downstairs. However, it's on a different UAD card, so this box here. So I couldn't use the plugin, so I just quickly put this tape emulation plugin on it by Ozone. So let's turn that off. Turn it on. It just basically, it's not the correct setting, but it basically drives the drums a bit more, so it makes them a bit more gelled together, a bit more saturated and so on. Then there it is again, a bit of tube distortion, a bit of compression, and then a limiter just to put a lid on it. And then that is the sort of raw elements of this Addictive drum kit. And it seems like quite a complicated process, but I think music is, you know, throughout making tunes and stuff like that. So you just got to persevere with things. Like, I've made plenty of drum kits which don't sound that good, but this particular one I'm really happy with. So I'm going to use this quite a lot. There's other things like you can use like parallel compression, where you send a copy of that whole drum group to another bus, another volume fader, in simple terms, and you can compress the hell out of that and mix it in so it sounds even more fatter. There's lots of different ways of enhancing stuff, and the key to making like neurofunk or any music really, dance music, you want it to sound as fat as you can, do you know what I mean? Get the drums sounding loads of low frequencies in the kicks, make them sound stupid, do you know what I mean? Certain kick drums that you might make and solo them sound awful, and they'll be like in the mix they can sound excellent, you know. It's not about cleaning everything up really, it's about dirtying everything up, which sounds mad, but the combination of little bits of distortion here and there on everything, you end up with this big thick mix. I tend to use EQ to cut away bits from sounds, like especially Fab Filter. Like, you know, if I was EQing a kick drum, I'm normally taking away, and if I want to make the kick drum a bit fatter, okay, I might EQ the lows a little bit. But I'd probably put some saturation on it to make it sound all distorted and falling apart, you know. And then I might go back and re-EQ after the distortion to take away some of the unwanted harmonic content. But I basically want huge kick drums. I want really nice sounding, crystal clear, but fat sounding and distorted at the same time snares. My hi-hats I try and keep quite clean, because if you start messing around with like high frequency stuff like hi-hats and put distortion on it, that's no good for your ears really. It just becomes a bit of a mess. Cool, is everyone following what I'm saying? Excellent. So let's go and move on to basses then. So I'm not going to save this. What I would do is, and we're going to do that, is make loads of bass sounds. There's different ways of doing it, and bounce them to audio. So let's have a quick look at this. I'll take it off a loop and solo these. You can listen to the bass. Let me turn the reverb off this as well. It was winding me up when I heard it. Yeah, there's loads of reverb on this somewhere. It's not that. Is it on ascend? I just have to roll with it on, I think. Unless it's on the individual channels. Yeah, that. I don't want that reverb. So let's have a listen to these particular basses. Any good? They're pretty mad. Some of them's a combination of some of the tunes we've done with Malix and Chrissy, and some of them I made that particular day or the day before, as I was, just experimenting with sound. So let me close this and open up, for instance, Reactor. You can use with sound design. FM synths is good for using lots of, they call them operators, which are just oscillators, and routing them through each other, but you tend to keep it quite basic and work with a lot of sine waves, which don't worry about too much. But I find it's more about distortion with sounds. So what I mean by that is, if I take this, whatever this patch is here, solo it, take the plugins off it, and get this to work. Why doesn't it want to play? Okay, I have to hold it down here. It's not the greatest sound in the world, is it? So I'll just do it an octave higher. So that's the patch on its own. So let's have a look at what synth it is. So this is the new Reactor, and there's a thing called Reactor blocks. So it's the most simple looking synth, to be fair, once you get your head around the fact that you've probably never seen it, or if you have seen it, it does look a bit weird at first. But then once you analyse it, like any synth, it's not as confusing as you think it is. So you have the basic controls of the synth here, which is like pitch bend and your mod wheel. So if we had a MIDI keyboard on here, you could assign it glide, which is portamento. So if you hold down two notes when it's monophonic, they will glide to each other. So like you can use it like pitch bends and stuff. You have an envelope which shapes the sound. So you've got the attack, decay and sustain on this one. Then you have two oscillators, and I think they would be, they're based on Moog. They look like Moog oscillators and they sound like Moog oscillators. So a Moog, old Moog synth. And you basically route them through each other, and you've got FM filters on it as well, which is very unique for this, for a Moog really. The FM filtering does some crazy stuff where you can feed one oscillator into another oscillator and get some really crazy effects. So I don't know if you know much about the different types of synthesis, but maybe in your own time, or ask one of the tutors here about synthesis if you haven't learned about it already, because you've got like additive, subtractive, FM synthesis, and they're all slightly different ways of making sounds. FM is really good for basses. It's like, when I listen to things like Skrillex, I understand it, but at the time I was like, I can't believe these basses the first time I heard them. Now it's quite straightforward as such, but I've definitely not taken anything away from him because he come up with a wicked sound. So all I'm doing really is I've made a sound in this by moving a few knobs. It's not that much to it because there's only two oscillators. I don't think I'm even using the reverb, whatever. There's another envelope shaper here. I didn't create this, it was a preset in Reactor blocks, and I've just gone and tweaked it. Cool. Nothing more than that. We could all sit here and tweak it until you think it sounds alright. So at the moment it sounds like this. Whatever, maybe drop it an octave. Sounds rubbish again, so back up an octave. So it's more about the processing and what I put on it now. So let's have a look at the chain. So I put trash on it, which is isotope trash. And I've just used it in single band mode because it's a multi-band distortion unit amongst lots of other things. And it's just got a preset on it, or it's not a preset actually, it's just a type of distortion because you've got lots of different types here. Distortion, drive, 40, fuzz, these are all like categories. So you can go through them and it's almost like a guitar amp really, where you can just put different types of distortion on it. You can learn this plugin quite quickly. It's done in like different pages really, if you want to call it. So if you look down at the bottom, we're in the trash mode. That's all I'm using it for. So I'm just focusing on that, and you've got different stages. You've got a filter, so you can EQ stuff, basically filter stuff out. So what was we on? Was it on that one? So back on that, you can shape the type of distortion. I'm not sure what pre is. That must be, it's almost like pre, maybe the volume going into it. Not too sure, but you know, I just use my ears. Drive is obviously driving it harder. You've got gain, which is like a volume for, normally for if you're using different bands, it'll come in more handy. That's the way I see it for right now. And you've got a mix function here, so it mixes between the original sound source and the distorted sound source. So I'm not using it very deeply. I'm not going into the filter section, reverb, which is the convolution reverb, the compression, or any other pages. I just wanted to take that sound and distort it. So I've got dry and wet here, so that's full distortion, like the whole, all you're hearing is the plug-in, or that's the original sound. So I'll put it in the middle. I've got a combination of the two. So if I draw quickly, just one MIDI note on, let's go back here. So you can use most of the plugins that I've been talking about in any DAW, any program, whether it's Logic, Ableton, whatever. You know, I haven't really been using any Cubase stock plugins. Because the portamento keeps jumping around, so I'm just going to put that note on so I don't have to keep playing the note. Without the distortion, it sounds like this. With the distortion, I could drive it harder. Has like a consistent sort of high frequency fuzz to it. These chains all vary. This is just me making sound. So I use like a stereo enhancer, which basically is just spreading out the higher frequencies, so it's got some width to it, because it's like a mono sounding bass at the moment. It was essentially, it was almost like a sub bass really, with a bit of fuzz on it. Then I put a bit of reverb on it, which is this new Fab Filter reverb unit, Pro R. So have you guys heard of this or seen this? So what it is you can, this is an EQ, so I'm going to cut out all the lower frequencies, say, and this is a decay of the reverb. So it's like a decay rate and a dampening sort of, so I can dampen the reverb. If I pushed it up like this point here, it'd make it, let me do it, well, it'd make it really bright. Or if I pushed it there, it's more of the focus on that sort of frequency, which is whatever it's set at, like 1000 hertz or whatever. Don't worry about it too much. It sounds wicked. The presets are good. You know, it's like a very good reverb. You can really shape yourself rather than having to dial in stuff and, you know, like the old way of using reverb. They've kind of like switched it on its head. It's really good. So you have the other normal controls of reverb, like the mix space, like how long it is, how far away it puts the object, and so on. I'm using it for pretty much nothing. I just want it for a bit of like tiny bit of stereo information. Then I've put an EQ on it for whatever reason to get rid of some of the lower information. Then I use like this distortion plug-in for more distortion. I think it says bass, so I think it's designed for bass guitars. So turn it off. It might not do that much. I prefer that sound. It sounds like it's adding more harmonics to it. So if we look at this EQ here, let's bypass it. And then I'm going to turn it on. it's actually changing the shape of it. It's not adding more harmonics. It actually looks like it's sort of ducking some of the harmonics. They're still there, but it's like they've gone down in volume. I like the sound of it. It's all done with ears, like using your ears really. Then this is like being weird. And then this is like the OTT compressor. I'm going to turn this down here. And this is based on an Ableton compressor, multi-band compressor. And Xfire, the guy at Xfire who made Serum, just made a free version of it. So it's a really quick way of compressing each band and then boosting them. So if you want more bass out of something, rather than EQ it, you can squash it and then turn it up using a multi-band compressor. And you know, you don't want to overdo the tops. What I find with people who do bass sound design is the normal thing that happens when you first start doing it. You really focus on the top frequencies. But really, it's not so much about the tops, it's about getting the low frequencies right and the lower mids. So if you're making bass, make sure you have some high frequency information when you start, some fuzz and stuff like that, but really think about the bass and the sonic weight in the lower mids, because that's where the clout of neurofunk or any real dirty bass sound comes from. You know, I spent too long messing with the tops and not paying attention to everything else, because I thought that's where all the cool sound is, but it's not actually there. But it takes a while for you to hear it. And then again, I've used this Camel Crusher in a way so it just clips the sound, so don't worry about that. It's just making sure it doesn't go way into the red. There's a noise gate on this as well, and what a gate does, it's an old school studio thing that it opens when the sound source is loud enough, then closes when the sound source is quieter again. The reason I'm using a gate is because of all these distortions I've added to it. There's some hiss, believe it or not, and some like noise sitting there. So when I'm sitting in the studio, all I could hear when I stopped playing bass sounds was just underneath on my speaker. So I wanted to just get rid of that so I could just focus on what I was doing. So let's go back to the bass and hit play. Pretty consistent sound. So there'd be other versions of it. Let's see what this one sounds like. Another version. So that's got more movement in it. So now I'm making this sound, I could then get an EQ, right? So a filter shapes the sound, right? By taking parts of the frequency, enhancing it, cutting bits, and so on. I like filters on synths, but also I like doing stuff manually. So what I might do, I'm just using this as an example, it's not going to be the greatest sound, is set it so I can record this. Let me turn that off. Set it so I can record this in. So this is going out, it's going out to a group. So when I hit play on this channel here, I've set the input up basically on this audio channel to record the bass. So when I hit record, hopefully it should record it in. Yeah, so down the bottom I've got this bit of audio. So if I took this, lengthen the note out, put a loop around it, got an EQ like this, press play and start moving it around, maybe put in more points like this, highlight them all and just use the gain for instance and start swapping them around. I actually think that sounds sick. I'd use that. So this is mad because you just mess around really. I'm just using clipping really. I'm clipping the hell out of the last plugin, which is that Camel Crusher, and using all the artifacts which are all messy, and I'm going to use them as bass sounds. So let me put in the automation. Some of it's alright. you could make that sound a lot better, to be fair, if you spent a lot more time on it. Once I've done that, this sounds not the greatest, but we're going to use it anyway. I'm just going to hit record. Mute that original patch. And have a listen to it. Like, it's cool. You can enhance it a lot more. Take little snippets of it. You know, I might layer that up with another bass patch. It was written in F, so if I got a sub and put it underneath, it'd have the bass back because it's kind of been filtered out with that weird EQ shape. But I like that sound. I could, I don't know, copy it over, stretch another bit out. I can scroll through it by holding down 2 buttons on Cubase. Have a listen to these. Don't want that last bit. I can, because I'm working in audio, I can do very strange things to it, like re-pitch it in all over the place, so it starts going all through different semitones. So I'm going to hit process now. Who knows how this is going to sound? Probably awful. So, and then I could reprocess that again, record that back in, put more plugins on it, layer it up. I could, I don't know, make 3 copies of it, detune them slightly. I'm going to do 1 up 2. This one I'm going to do down 2. And then I'm going to pan 1 left, pan 1 right. I'm going to take the bass out of both these duplicates, because otherwise you get phasing in the lower frequencies, which I don't want. But I want it in the top. So let's have a listen. So without it, and so on. So I just keep running different patches. There's some instances of FM8 here. Let me mute that. Not a very good sound. Let's try this one. Not the greatest sound either. Lots of fuzz on it. Let me open up a better project to look at. We've got about 20 minutes. So I'm going to go through Serum quickly. So I take the same processes with Serum. I made these on the train on the way here. These patches are a bit more complex, but they sound better. They've got more content to them. Using just, going back to that reactor, or using some very basic oscillators to make a sound, you can get wicked results. Do you know what I mean? It's not about having the Serum with like amazing wavetables. You can get more out of the distortion and with filtering and EQing afterwards. You know, you can make sounds that sound pretty incredible. You just got to keep persevering, keep processing, trying different things, making stuff up, you know, being creative. So Serum, if you haven't used Serum before, it's like, I suppose it's like Massive on steroids really. They've taken the concepts of Native Instruments Massive and then just kind of improved it. So you've got like, I suppose you've got 4 oscillators, which are essentially what make the sound of a synth. So you've got oscillator A here, oscillator B, you've got a sub-oscillator, and then you've got a noise oscillator. Same in Massive, it has it has a noise oscillator as well. I'm not going to get into how you can use Serum, because we haven't got time really, it's like 20 minutes. But you've got like, the way I've made these sounds, let's have a listen to this sound. Yeah, so it sounds alright actually. I haven't heard these yet. I made them on my headphones. I could definitely resample that and turn it into something else. Let's listen to, what's this sound here? Yes, they're pretty crazy sounds. And this one, actually let me just see if I can play it on the keyboard. Oh yeah, I remember making this one. I like the offbeat. It'll be too low now. No, that's it. Try this one. And I quickly threw to some drums over it. It might sound strange to see what it sounded like. I was trying to make one of them sort of weird skippy tunes, like as an idea, probably spent about a minute on it, and then I pulled into the train station last night. So. Actually quite like that. Should I finish that one? Yeah, we'll finish that one, I think. It's weird though, because like, if you don't have breaks as well, like when you're making songs, I could, if I hadn't played that to you, I probably would have never even thought about that. But I think the simplicity of it works. The fact that it's just like not really much going on. So if we looked at one of these serum patches, it's not as complicated as it looks. So you have your sub oscillator running, you have a noise oscillator. A lot of people tend to use this J106HP, which I think is from an old Juno. I might be making it up. Then you have two oscillators here, which are your main sound source. One of them's like a saw, and this is like a basic saw, or what is that shape? I don't know actually, but they're very basic. You can get very complex wavetables in this synth. You can import your own and stuff like that. You don't need to go mad. You don't need to like have these really crazy sounding like initial sounds. Like working with saws or sine waves can get you the results that you want. And it's more about the filtering and the filter shapes. This is the benefit of Serum. You can draw on all your filter shapes. So this filter here, filter 1, is basically adjusting the parameters of what I've told it to. So it's turning the sub up and down here. It's adjusting the volume of the noise. It's adjusting the position of this wavetable, which there's nothing going on. So it just jumps between three different sort of styles. And this one's probably the same, strange. I have sent a copy using FM synthesis. I've sent oscillator B through oscillator A, which is quite a common thing you do in FM synthesis. You route the oscillators through themselves to create the sound. You don't have to do that, and it doesn't actually do that much to this sound. So again, this LFO shape is attached to the volume here of this oscillator. Same with oscillator A, and oscillator B, it's controlling the volume as well. It's also then synced to the filter with this band pass, and it's adjusting the cutoff, and that's about it. It's strange really, because these tell the routing what goes through the filter. So here I've got A, so oscillator A is going through this filter, but for some reason I didn't put B through it, don't know why. And the sub's going through it, but the noise isn't. So I've not put the LFO to BPM like the grid. It's independent, so let me just solo it. It'll lengthen the sound as well. Solo this sound. So if I change the rate, I can adjust the sort of movement in the sound. I did do one other thing on this matrix page where I put like a pitch dive as well on LFO2. So it should, the first note, yeah. And so on. The other sounds that I made would be very similar, but I would have changed the wavetables, what do you call it? I've forgotten what it is. The wavetables, the oscillator type, to create this sound. So let me just copy that MIDI down so we can just hear it. Get that out of the way. So adjust the rate. Nothing much going on when you hear it like that. This one. This one is actually on the grid, so it sounds better. The way I've drawn these in, it was making that sort of cool rhythm. I just made it to them drums really. It's just like on a sort of weird offbeat sort of bass sound to it. So if I was happy with these sounds, I could then, oh, one other thing I did do to each of these synths was build a chain. So without any effects on it, Serum didn't sound like that. It sounded a bit thin. That's with the plugins on, so I turn it off. So trash coming into play, but this time I used it in multi-band mode. I was using distortion on each different band. That's about it really. I might have used a little bit of filtering between the bands. Fab filter, I always just make sure the lower frequencies are in mono, which I've shown you probably too many times now. Then this thing is a multi-band compressor, and all I've done is compress the low frequencies quite hard, but then turn them up in volume. So have a listen. So there's a threshold. Just shape the sound really, so it's squashing the frequencies I've told it to, and then enhancing them in volume, turning them up in volume. The Fab Filter Pro R, because a bit of reverb on basses is good, and I've EQ'd out the lower information of the reverb here, so let's turn it right up. It's a bit drastic, so I had really minimal settings, so it just gives it a bit of stereo width and a bit more character, to be fair. Camel Crusher, that I've just used to, what Camel Crusher do, it stop things, I don't know why, it acts like a clipping plugin, it basically won't let anything go above 0 that hits it. But it works well, because otherwise I'd clip my channel here, and I don't want to start clipping my mixer. I just want to clip the plugins. As clipping, I mean go well into the red. Do you know what I mean? Because otherwise, if I'm trying to use these bass sounds in a record, when I look at as they are, when I look at the mixer, I've got like all my basses are like plus 10 dB into the red. What am I going to do when I'm trying to mix it? So I don't mind it redlining on the actual plugins. But I need to put a lid on it. So this Camel Crusher acts like a lid. See the volume fader here? Straight away, it's just gone miles into the red. As soon as I put this on it, it brings it back down. Don't know why. Out of the red. I do know why. It clips something, and clipping's like essentially like chopping the top and the bottom of it off and just making it a block of sound. No dynamics, nothing. It's just a block of bass. You know, even though it's got movement in it, the volume of it, the dynamics of it are just a block, essentially. And after that, I would put like, which is something Malik showed me, is a tiny bit of EQ, not to enhance the sound, but what that does, it puts dynamics back. So if you imagine a sound's been squashed, so when you look at it on the screen, it's a block. There's no ups and downs in it, it's a block. If I put a bit of EQ after it, in that sound, when that frequency plays, where the EQ point is, it adds a bit of dynamics back. Does this make sense? Kind of, I'm not going to, we've got literally 10 minutes, so yeah, putting a little EQ point after it and making sure nothing's clipping after this adds some more dynamics back. So that sound there, bit crazy. Let me add a group channel. I'm not sure if I've set anything up like that. So group. I'm going to try rendering it, and this is a function in Cubase where it just render its audio, but a lot of times it crashes Cubase. I don't know why. They've never fixed it. Or it might just be me. So there you go. So luckily it didn't crash. So now it's just bounced out the audio. So I don't have any of them plugins on it, and I can do what I want with it. Same with the one above. I might just quickly do it to that. Actually, I'm going to take that and render that. Wow, it likes me today. And this last one here. Oh no. Oh yeah. Hopefully it's not going to crash. Maybe I did it wrong. Doesn't want to do it. Yeah, it's the same thing. So I'll just use these two sounds anyway. I like that. I like the shape of that first sound. I could then take that, put this here. This one's actually got more power to it, even though, let me put this to 0 dB. It feels like the first note is not loud enough. They're both at the same amount of volume. If I turn it up, I start clipping the channels. So what I'd do is go back to the original sound and find a way of giving it more harmonic content, yeah, more frequency, make it sound thicker, make it sound bigger. This sound sounds sick. I'm down with this one. Comes out the speakers wicked. This one doesn't really cut it. So I'd have to work on that sound a bit more. But that sound does, the transient part of it. So maybe I'll just nick that. It's to do with the filter shape, where I'd attached the LFO. It was fading it in, and it didn't, you know, it was losing quite a lot of the content of the sound. Right, if I was happy with that, I'd start making a tune, to be fair. You know, that's what I was doing last night, was making new sounds so I could start a new tune with them. So it's like that pre-production thing that I was saying. So also you could put things in samplers, in Cubase. You've probably heard of Contact, or if you use Logic, you've got EXS, or if you use Ableton, you've got Sampler. So you could resample the sound. So you could work in audio, or we could, you know, if this works, right, you could drag it into a sampler. So this sound here, alright, I need to make this a bit bigger, sorry. Drag this sound in here, set the root note to an F, because I know I made it an F. Put the keyboard on. Bring it up an octave. I like that sound. I don't feel like I pitch it up. And then maybe put a loop on it and do the general sort of things you can do with samplers. Start making loops. And so on, and process it, put more distortion on it, keep going and going and going, and you end up with, like, I end up either recording it in like I did earlier, or bouncing stuff out, and then you end up with folders full of basses. So I have folders full of drums, folders full of basses. Like, some of these I'll use, some of them are pretty rubbish, you know. And then, you know, you just keep experimenting. So that's kind of how I make neurofunk. I'll quickly show you one last thing, because we've got 5 minutes. I'll close Cubase. Let's save. Ableton. So does anyone in here use Ableton? Some people. So Ableton looks crazy if you don't use Ableton. Like, I think you had another guy come in, I don't know if it was with you guys, who was teaching Ableton. I saw the tutorial online. Who is it that you had in? Culprit in Bristol. Yeah, so there was a tutorial online of Culprit, and you know, he's an excellent producer, but if you don't use Ableton, it looks crazy. So, oh, I deleted the wrong thing then. Let's put that back. So Ableton looks like this. It's a bit back to front. You have, like, all your controls over this side, and these are actually folders. So with the Next Height remix, we worked a lot in audio, especially on the drums. So we bounced out lots of stuff from Addictive Drums, hits, loops, messed around with them. Let me set up the preferences. No one. Right. Still not doing it. Oh, wrong one. Yeah, these little bits are here. These are audio with different plugins on them. Looks so different to Cubase, but once you get your head around it, it's really useful. You got ride loops and stuff like that to make up these drums. If I close that down, what's this? Let me just check this. Yeah, this is the main element of it. When we done the remix, you have to go and hear the original. It's more of a dance floor mix. We took the Reese sound that TC used in the original and we pitched it up and then messed around with it with loads of crazy little plugins in Ableton and made like a sort of triplet sound of the record. So it's like you can hear them little bits of basses and stuff. It's like, you know, they could have been from what we was just messing around with in Cubase. You make all these little hits and sounds and noises and you end up using them in a tune. Don't get me wrong, it does take a while for your ears to become used to listening to things and knowing what sounds good and what doesn't. But anyone can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. Do you know what I mean? Some of you probably already can do it, you know? So if I put the drums in, if I play everything. Like, I quickly found this video that was online. So we knocked this remix out because we'd done all the hard work, like I've said a few times, like made the drums, made the bass sounds and everything. When we got this remix in, we'd done this remix in 2 hours, and then I saw videos like this everywhere. Like, hold on, let me open it in big. So a 2-hour remix got us nominated for Remix of the Year, got us a UKF upload, top 10 Beatport. We got paid, loads of PR, and this exposure, like, it's just DJs playing it all around the world. And so on really. Like, again, the hard work was already done, so we knocked out the remix. And if you can get your head around that workflow, there's loads of them. There was like Boomtown, Let It Roll, Fabric, you know, that's when it closed down as well. But that's only the video clips that I saw online. There's a few more in there as well. So, and I know I've heard it being played at a lot of places. So it was really good to see, to be honest. Cool, so we've got like 3 minutes left. Have you got any questions, really? Yeah?
What made you want to start doing it?
Making music? Yeah. I grew up playing drums. Don't know why. I just wanted to play drums, and I was just, when my band split up, I had nothing to do, and I just started messing around with computers. And then one day I got a booking. Like, I played a few parties locally, and then I got a booking in Canada. And then it sort of, I was like, I'm going to go to Canada. So I went out and played in Canada, and like it all just sort of snowballed from there. And I never thought I'd be a music producer. I thought I just don't know what I thought I'd be. You know, it's just I've worked very hard for it, very hard. And you know, you have to give up a lot of stuff to follow your passion. But I just luckily somehow I just ended up being a drum and bass producer, and I'm kind of like here today, really. Oh, that's one other thing I was going to say, is I brought this along. Have you ever heard of a sub pack? So these things are like, they fit on the back of your chair, right? So even if you haven't got, like, if you've got a bedroom set up or whatever, normally the problem is bass. Like, you could either not hear it or someone else can hear it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like your next door neighbour or whatever. So what this does is it connects to your sound card or whatever, you know, you can plug an audio lead in it. And I can be making a tune on my headphones and put this on the back of my chair, and it vibrates like bass does. And it's the most insane thing because it makes you you feel like you're in a nightclub. There's no, like, I've got something resting on my back. You don't even think of that. It doesn't come into it. You feel like you're submerged by bass because it's rumbling and everything like that. It's the most amazing tool for music producers. I've got like a massive sub in my studio. It's huge, but I still use this and sometimes a sub because this gives me a more accurate representation of bass than my actual real sub in the studio does. Alright, it's not the most expensive sub. If I had a very expensive sub, I probably wouldn't be, you know, I'd be more trusting in it. But this I use on the train, I use everywhere. If I was making tunes at home, I don't have to have the speakers up really loud to feel it. So this is like the future of like consuming sound. You know, they're putting these in cinemas and in cars and stuff like that to go with virtual reality and stuff like that, but also in music production. It's a wicked tool. Really, really good. I don't know how it was started. Yeah, I don't know. It's phenomenal. Like, you have to try it because you just think, oh, whatever, it's just a gimmick or whatever. But if you have one of them and a small set of speakers, you feel like you're in a nightclub. Or if you have them and some headphones, you're like, whoa. It's the most mad experience, but it's improved my music making, like time, because I can make more music quickly. It's improved my mix downs because I can, you know, trust that. It sounds mad. And it's a phenomenal bit of kit. It's really, really good. And I see the way we listen to sound and the way we consume things is going to change in the next 10, 20 years. This would just be normal. It'd be built in your jacket or something. You know what I mean? It just, because you're immersed in it. As I say, they're already putting it in cinemas. So imagine if you're playing a computer game even, you got your, I've not even tried it yet, virtual reality on, but you're also feeling all the vibrations, and when you get shot, your whole body feels it and stuff like that. It's incredible. So something that we've all got to be aware of when we're making tunes now, or making, you know, you might go on to make sounds for computer games and films and stuff like that, which is where the money's at. You know, this would be factored into it, how the body feels the music now, not just out of speakers, you know. It's kind of like, if you think about it, it's quite old school now, just two things in a room. You end up wearing sound, which sounds mad, but that's my prediction for my 30 seconds of thought then. Yeah, so that's about it really. Cool, thank you very much. Yeah, so that's my day, teaching how I make music, everything that's involved with music videos, from start to finish, remixes, sound design, drum programming, and a whole lot more really. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you soon.